What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Huddle Chat Sports Network's very own Fantasy Football Huddle, presented as always by DanklyfeBrand. Let's talk sports and Shank It Golf brand. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to Week 17's Stardoms and Situms. We're going to have a nice condensed Stardoms and Situms for youth championship teams. That way you guys can ask your questions at the live episode on Sunday. And guys, this will be the final, it sucks to say it, guys, the final Stardoms and Situms for the 2023 season for season 4 here on the Fantasy Football Huddle. We got a ton of content already ready for season 5 for the 2024 season, and I cannot wait to bring that to you guys. But we got to help y'all hoist those trophies. We've gotten all the way here. Now's the time to set those lineups for the last time and get that money, get that trophy, get whatever it is, even if it's just bragging rights. And if you're not playing in the championship game, that's okay. We're going to be getting our finishing spot as good as we can this week. And we're coming in next year strong from the lessons that we've learned this season. Am I right or am I right? Now, like I said, we're getting into Week 17's, the final Stardoms and Situms, and we're going to do a nice condensed version for you guys. So without further ado, let's fill up your cup, roll something up, and get right into the Stardoms and Situms. As always, as we like to do here, we're starting at the quarterback position. We're going to be starting Dak Prescott, obviously. Dak Prescott has been absolutely killing it. You're looking at him playing the Lions this week, and it's an absolutely amazing matchup. You're looking at the Cowboys being heavily favored, and this is going to be probably a shootout game if the Cowboys don't just dog walk the Lions altogether. But I give the Lions the respect that they have earned this point in the season. I think it's going to be a better game than most people are expecting. I definitely think that Dak Prescott is going to be a top 10 quarterback this week. So it's going to be nice and easy. My start of the week, as far as people that we weren't really expecting to start, is going to be Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. He's playing the Atlanta Falcons. He scored 24.5 points in last week's win over the Arizona Cardinals. And he should have another nice stat line this week against another weak defense. They've allowed seven different quarterbacks to put up 17 plus points, and they've allowed 4 of those 7 to score more than 20. I think Justin Fields has his way with the Atlanta Falcons defense this week. I also think things are looking real purdy for the Purdy man, Brock Purdy, against the Commanders this week. He had a terrible stat line last week. I mean, they had a really bad game against the Ravens, and the Ravens proved to potentially be Super Bowl favorites this last Sunday. We'll see if they can continue with the health and things like that to keep it going, but that's another episode for the Huddle Chat Sports Show. Now for the Fantasy Football Huddle. Brock Purdy is going to be having a pretty decent game. I would keep a tab, a monitor on that shoulder stinger that he took, just to see if it's going to be a potential problem throughout the week. And if it is a potential problem throughout the week, I might consider changing things up. But I think when you're looking at the Commanders playing absolutely terrible football on the defensive end, especially against opposing quarterbacks, Brock Purdy is in for a beautiful stat line. I also think Matt Stafford is on his way to leading you to a championship as well. He's playing the New York Giants. He's been one of the hottest quarterbacks in football. The Giants have been one of the worst defenses in football. Start Matt Stafford this week. I'm also starting Kyler Murray against the Eagles this week. He overcame a tough matchup in Chicago last week, and he proved that he is still Kyler Murray. He's still number 1 in Arizona. You're looking at the Eagles defense allowing quarterbacks to go kind of crazy against them. It could be definitely a higher scoring affair than most people are thinking. I think Kyler Murray has top 10, at least top 12 potential this week in fantasy football. I'm also feeling pretty good, if you need a deeper start, about Baker Mayfield. I'm feeling good about Derek Carr, and I'm also feeling good about Jordan Love against the Vikings. As far as people that were sitting this week, I'm not sitting to per se. I mean, you don't want to get too crazy in the championship games, but I am tempering my expectations. If you've got 2 quarterbacks, if you're playing that smart game and you're looking matchup based, I'm looking at Tua against the Ravens and seeing what he did against that Niners team last week, seeing what that Ravens defense has been doing, honestly, all season long. They're the best defense in the NFL at this point, and I think that this is just not a great matchup for the Miami Dolphins. I think that they've allowed the second fewest points of any defense in the NFL. So I definitely think I'm going to stay away from Tua, or at least temper my expectations for Tua this week. I am staying all the way away from Jake Browning in Cincinnati. He we had that flash, just like we had the Pastronaut there for a couple days. We had that flash of Jake Browning in the pen, and that's over now. He's got a tough matchup. They're looking at the Chiefs defense that has really shut quarterbacks down. They've allowed the 5th fewest quarterback points this season, and they're in Kansas City. Things are just not looking good for Jake Browning. I'm also going to be staying away from Geno Smith against the Steelers. That Steelers defense has just been fairly dominant, especially as they get healthy towards the end of the year. The defense has allowed an average of fewer than 15 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, so I'm going to be staying away from Geno if I can. As much as it pains me to say, I got to stay away from Gardner Minshew against the Raiders. He can be a useful option when the matchup is favorable, but Max Crosby and that Raiders defense is not going to be a favorable matchup for Gardner Minshew. I think the Colts still have a pretty decent chance to win that game, continue their playoff hunt, but I'm staying away from Gardner Minshew. Also, if it wasn't obvious, we're going to be staying away from Willie Mayo, we're going to be staying away from Easton Stick, and we're going to be staying away from Jacoby Brissett as well. Moving on into the running back situations that we got going on this week. Thankfully, we haven't had too many injuries going on as far as fantasy football running backs that in the end of these last couple of weeks. But we do have a couple of big players that we got coming into these stardoms this week, like Travis Etienne against the Panthers. I like him a lot. He's been on a cold streak over the last couple of weeks. He scored a combined 16 fantasy points, averaging fewer than 3 yards per rush these last few weeks. But you're looking at him playing the Panthers defense, and that Panthers defense is absolutely putrid. I think Travis Etienne is in for a get-right game this week. I'm also starting DeAndre Swift against the Cardinals. He broke out of his rut last week. You're looking at this Cardinals defense being just about as good, if not a better matchup than that Giants defense was for him last week. They've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs over the last 4 weeks this season. So I'm definitely going to be running with DeAndre Swift against that Cardinals defense. I'm also going to be running Javonte Williams against the Chargers, especially considering the fact they sat Russ. But I think they're going to be leaning on the run even heavier than they have over the last 6 games. And over the last 6 games, Javonte Williams has been struggling to meet expectations. So I think it's going to go hand in hand that they increase their running situation, they increase their running involvement in this game, and Javonte Williams is going to have better involvement and potentially higher touchdown potential with this weak Chargers defense that they're facing as well. I'm going to be starting Najee Harris if I have to. If I have nobody else better to put in my flex position, I'm going to be cool starting Najee Harris. And I feel the same way about Chuba Hubbard. To be honest, I feel better about Chuba Hubbard than I do about Najee Harris this week. He's been getting plenty of touches in that Panthers offense, and he's playing that Jaguars defense. And their defense has surrendered 5 touchdowns and the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs over the last 4 weeks. So if you got to start them both, I'm starting Najee, I'm starting Chuba Hubbard, but I do like Chuba Hubbard more than Najee. I'm also going to, of course, start Kenneth Walker, Zamir White, who we talked about on the waiver wire episode, and Aaron Jones against the Minnesota Vikings. As far as players we're sitting, I'm not going to sit Tony Pollard if I don't have to. Tony Pollard is tough to sit, but he's been playing with our playoff lives at this point, people. He got us all the way up here. He had a hot streak getting into the playoffs. And you're just looking at him kind of being the Tony Pollard that we had for the first 9 weeks. He's playing that Lions defense. I'm just telling you to temper your expectations. Tony Pollard will be lucky to get his projections this week. As far as sit of the week is going to be David Montgomery against the Dallas Cowboys defense, though. He's been sharing that workload with Jahmyr Gibbs. The Cowboys defense is one of the best rushing defenses in the league, so I'm going to stay away from David Montgomery if I can. I'm staying away from Devon Achane against the Ravens. I think it's going to be a tough going for this Miami Dolphins offense this week, and Devon Achane being the number 2 rushing offense, I think is going to be really reliant on explosive plays to have a big game. Ezekiel Elliott for the Patriots against the Bills is more of a warning for you in standard leagues. I feel like he could warrant flex potential, but you have to have a better option than Ezekiel Elliott against the Bills. The Bills defense has been extremely tough on running backs, especially since week 13, so I am definitely going to avoid him if I can. I'm also going to be staying away from Khalil Herbert for the Chicago Bears, James Conner from the Cardinals, Gus Edwards from the Dolphins, and Antonio Gibson Gus Edwards against the Dolphins and Antonio Gibson against the Niners. That's going to do it for the running back position, finishing things off as we love to do with the pass catchers, wrapping things up with a nice little bow for you guys and not keeping you here too long. Wide receivers, we're going to be starting Deebo Samuel, of course. I like Deebo Samuel a lot this week. Against the Commanders, the weak-ass defense, I really think Deebo Samuel has an absolute potential league-winning game this week. I'm also going to be putting my trust back into Stephon Diggs. My trust has been wavering on Stephon Diggs these last few weeks, but I'm going to be putting it back in him for this Patriots game. He's been a dud in the last 2 months. He's put up single digits in 3 straight games, but he's in the column as a starter because he's playing that Patriots defense. He's owned New England throughout the entirety of his career. He beat them for at least 17 points in 4 straight games and 5 of his last 6 games. I think that Stephon Diggs is an amazing start for this week against the New England Patriots. I'm also going back and start Nico Collins. He's back to health. What more do we really got to say about Nico Collins besides he's playing the Titans defense? The Titans have struggled against wide receivers. They got CJ Stroud back. Be feeling confident about starting Nico Collins this week. I'm also going to be starting Rashee Rice against the Bengals. He scored 11 plus points in 5 straight games, including 3 with more than 18 PPR points. He's playing a good matchup against the Bengals, who have allowed over the past 4 weeks 5 touchdowns and the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I'm liking things for Scary Terry McLaurin against the Niners this week. He's been tough to trust over the past month, similar to Stephon Diggs. However, you're looking at him against the Niners, and it's actually a positive matchup. No team in the league has allowed more catches to opposing perimeter wide receivers, and their overall defense has allowed the 9th most points to the wide receiver position. That makes him a viable flex this week for sure. I'm also feeling confident about starting Chris Godwin against the Saints, Zay Flowers against the Dolphins, and D-Hop against the Texans. I'm going to be sitting George Pickens this week. I think that last week, it was a great week for George Pickens. We're all going to feel like we need to start George Pickens after last week, but I'm tempering expectations off of a career-high game. He's not going to have that same exact performance last week. He failed to score double digits in 7 of his previous 8 games. I mean, was last week a fantastic week for him under Mason Rudolph? Yes, it was. Do they get Kenny Pickett back this week? We don't 100% have that answer, but Kenny Pickett was the quarterback for at least 6 of those 7 games that George Pickens was putting up single digits. So I'm going to be tempering expectations on George Pickens this week. I'm also going to be sitting Calvin Ridley against the Panthers. He put up 2 touchdowns last week. It's going to make him tough to sit. Same thing with George Pickens. It's hard to sit these players coming off of their best games of the season. And for George Pickens, the best game of his career. However, you're looking at him playing Trevor Lawrence, who has an ankle injury, a knee injury, a shoulder injury, coming off a concussion protocol. You're looking at the Panthers having allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing perimeter wide receivers since week 13. Things just don't look good for the Jaguars offense right now to be a fantasy relevant offense in the championship game or in a game that you need to win. I'm staying away from Drake London against the Bears if I can. He's had a difficult time in the stat sheets. He scored single digits in 3 of his last 4 games. He's been held without a touchdown since week 4, and the Falcons are just fucking terrible. I mean, do we really want to start any Atlanta Falcon right now that's not Bijan Robinson? Not me. I'm staying away from Tyler Lockett against the Steelers. He posted a solid game last week. 16.1 points against the Titans. I mean, one of the worst wide receiver defenses in the league, the Tennessee Titans are. But he's been held to 10 or fewer points in 4 of his last 6 games. You're looking at him playing Pittsburgh this week, and they have been really tough on wide receivers. They've allowed just 2 touchdowns and the 7th fewest points to wide receivers since week 13. So I'm just going to at least temper my expectations for Tyler Lockett. I haven't been terribly confident in him this season. Staying away from Jacoby Myers against the Colts. Staying away from Garrett Wilson against the Browns. Staying away from Gabe Davis, and I'm also staying away from Demario Douglas, despite the fact that the Patriots are just devoid of talent. As far as tight ends go, we're going to go through this as fast as humanly possible. We're starting Trey McBride. We're starting Darren Waller. We're starting Kyle Pitts. We're starting Gerald Everett. We're starting Njoku, obviously, and we're starting Chigo Okonkwo. We're going to be sitting Dalton Kincaid this week against the Patriots. We're going to be sitting Dalton Schultz this week. We're sitting Pat Freiermuth, staying away from Tucker Kraft, staying away from Tyler Conklin and Tyler Higbee. That's going to do it for today's Stardom and Sid'em episode. I hope that gives you all the information that you need to get those lineups set completely correct as you go into Thursday night, as you go into your championship game or your consolidation game or your third place game, whatever you're playing for right now. I hope you get that win this week, and I hope to see you as we start to do these episodes at the beginning of next season, as well as in my live episode on Sunday, the NFL kickoff show that we do every Sunday morning, 9:45 Mountain Standard Time, 11:45 Eastern Standard Time. That's going to do it for me today, y'all. Thank you so much for taking the time. And as always, keep your chin up and your attitude down. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.